The wind had the voice of something ancient that evening, whispering low over the open Wyoming plains. It moved like a warning cutting across the grass with purpose, stirring dust in tiny devils around the hooves of Eli McGraw's horse. He rode with the kind of weariness that doesn't come from fatigue but from loss too deep to measure, shoulders hunched under a coat too thin for the coming storm. Behind his eyes sat the ghost of a battlefield, a marriage, and a brother's death. That still rang louder than thunder. Each hoofbeat was a sentence in a story he no longer wished to read. The cattle trailed behind him, slow and unbothered, just specks against the growing black of the horizon. He had barely spoken all day, not too rusty, the loyal dog trotting beside his horse, not to himself. Words were for men with something left to build. Eli built fences no one paid him for, and drank coffee, black as cinder, just to feel something warm again. He had food in his saddlebags, bullets in his rifle, and nothing waiting for him but a cabin that leaned like an old drunk against the hill. When the wind changed sharp, and sudden he looked up, the sky was bleeding gray into bruised purple, lightning threading across the clouds like veins under skin. The plains darkened unnaturally fast. He muttered a curse and spurred the horse into a trot. The cattle scattered in confusion, but he let them go. Only the fool tried to fight a high plains storm, and won. The nearest shelter was his cabin, a mile out tiff. He made it before the rain turned roads into rivers. He reached the door just as the sky cracked open. Rain slammed the earth, thunder chasing it with a fury that made the dog bark. Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke and old whiskey. Eli shut the door hard, dropped his wet hat on a peg, and lit the lantern. The fire hissed as he fed it dry pine, and the little room began to glow with tired warmth. He knelt by the stove, warming his hands, rubbing away the sting of the cold. Rusty lay at his feet, ears twitching. That was when he heard it. A sound outside, not the wind, not the trees. A heavy, wet thud. Then again, he reached for the rifle. By instinct. Years of war had trained his nerves to move faster than thought. Rifle ready. He opened the door into a scream of wind and saw her. She lay crumpled on the edge of the porch, like a rag doll tossed there by God himself. A woman, soaked to the bone, mud smeared across her skirt, blood on her forehead. She didn't move when he called to her. Lightning lit up her face for a second. Eli dropped the rifle and moved. She was light in his arms, too light. Fever burned under her skin, and her breath came in weak, ragged pulls. He carried her inside, laid her on the cot with care he didn't know he still possessed. Her dress was torn. Her boots were mismatched. Her hands were scratched, nails caked with dirt. Whatever brought her here, it had tried to kill her along the way. He worked quickly. A cloth dipped in warm water, a flask to her lips. When her eyes fluttered open, they were glassy with fever, but wild with fight. Don't take me back," she whispered, voice cracked and small. "Easy," he said. "Ain't nobody here but me." She tried to sit up, failed. Her head hit the pillow again, and she mumbled, Clara, ... Clara Granger. He watched her for a long moment before nodding once. "Eli," he said. "Eli McGrath." She slept for hours while the storm raged on. He sat in a chair beside her, eyes on the door, then the fire, then her again. She had welts on her arms, blisters on her feet. Not from laziness. This was the damage of someone who had run too far, too fast, through hell. There were bruises under her collarbone, ones that hadn't come from a fall, that told him more than she had. He poured himself a cup of coffee and didn't drink it. Instead, he sat there listening to the rain hammer the roof, and wondered what kind of devils chased a woman into the wilderness, and why they hadn't stopped yet. By morning, the storm had broken, but left the world sodden and cold. She stirred, eyes flickering open again. "You kept me alive," she said, voice raw. "I didn't do much," he replied. "You made it here on your own legs. That counts for more. She looked around, clearly trying to remember. There was a wagon train, east of here. We were headed toward Fort Laramie. Her voice caught. They ambushed us. Bandits, not Indians. Men, drunk, dirty, mean. I ran. I didn't stop. He didn't speak, just nodded slowly. I was supposed to teach at a prairie schoolhouse, she added, almost as if it were a confession. Kids, books, a place that needed rebuilding. Lot of things need rebuilding, he muttered. Didn't think the West would welcome me like this. The West doesn't welcome anyone, he said. You carve your place in it, or it swallows you whole. The days passed slowly. She healed little by little. He fixed her meals, taught her how to keep the fire from smoking, even mended the tear in her coat. They didn't talk much, just enough. Sometimes, the silences between them said more than words could. One morning she laughed something small, something involuntary, and it startled him. The sound of life in this place had become foreign, but there it was, trembling in her throat. He told her bits of his story without meaning to, about the war, the loss, the land that gave nothing, but took everything. She listened, didn't pity, didn't judge, just listened, the way someone does when they know the weight of silence too well themselves. One afternoon, while he repaired a broken latch on the barn door, he caught her outside, staring at the sky. You'll want to leave soon, he said. She looked at him and didn't answer. Her eyes drifted to the horizon. I don't know where to go, she admitted, but I can't go back. You're not the only one, he replied. Later, after supper, she handed him a small ribbon, frayed at the ends, faded red. Was my sister's, she said. She died in childbirth back home. I kept this to remember her. I don't need it anymore. He looked at her, unsure what to say. He took it anyway. Held it like something fragile. She turned in early that night, leaving him with the fire and the silence again. But it felt different now, less empty. Like maybe the ghosts had stopped whispering for a while. Outside, the storm clouds had fled, leaving a sky littered with stars. Eli stepped onto the porch, breathed deep. The night smelled like wet earth and beginnings. He didn't know it yet, but the storm had delivered more than just rain and wreckage. It had brought change, in the form of a half-dead teacher with a fire in her spine and a past as broken as his own, and she was still here. That alone meant something, maybe everything. Clara's breathing steadied with each passing day, but the fire in her eyes hadn't dimmed. If anything, survival had sharpened it. She refused to lie idle for long. By the fourth morning, she was already moving about the cabin, quietly, with hands that trembled but never stopped. She insisted on helping, whether boiling water, slicing beans, or brushing down the horse with unsteady strokes. Eli watched her, but said little. Words weren't necessary to know the kind of damage she was healing from. Neither asked what came next. Neither admitted they didn't know. That morning, when the tracks appeared by the creek bootprints, fresh, deep, deliberate lie, didn't panic. He loaded his rifle with calm precision, handed Clara a pistol with an extra cylinder, and said, if someone comes through that door who ain't me, shoot to stop them. Don't shoot to scare. Her hands didn't shake when she took it. Only, her eyes flickered. He returned by dusk, with no signs of who made the prints, only a certainty in his gut. They were being watched. That night, she sat by the fire sharpening a kitchen knife with the same concentration she once gave to warming a child's alphabet with her voice. This time, the blade was for more than bread. They both understood that. 2 days later, the man arrived. Or rather, he appeared silent and sudden at the edge of the trees. A Shoshone scout, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a beer-hide cloak, with eyes that missed nothing. His face bore scars, some old, some recent, but it was his silence that struck Clara first. He didn't announce himself, didn't reach for a weapon. He simply watched from a distance. Unmoving. Eli saw him and froze. He raised his rifle halfway, then lowered it. The man nodded once and walked away. That night, Clara asked, "Do you know him?" "Only stories," Eli said. "They call him Raven Eyes. Used to scout for the army. Fought both sides when it suited him. He's not here by chance." The next morning, Raven Eyes sat outside the cabin waiting. He hadn't made a sound. Eli stepped out first, tense. Clara stayed behind the door. "You tracked the ones that hit her," Eli said. More statement than question. Raven Eyes nodded. "For men, they raided the wagon train 3 days before she reached you. One's kin to a man you shot near Sweetwater last spring." Eli looked away, jaw tight. "She's a marker to them now," Raven Eyes added. "And you, by keeping her alive." He turned to leave. "Wait," Clara said from the doorway. "What do they want?" Raven Eyes looked at her like he was seeing something beyond skin. "They want what all weak men want. To feel strong by breaking what's already wounded." She didn't flinch. The alliance formed without words. Raven Eyes returned the next day with a second horse and a quiet nod. Clara didn't question the urgency. Eli packed what they could carry: beans, dried meat, ammunition, the ribbon she'd given him. They left the cabin before dawn, with the dog pacing nervously between the horses. The trail west was hard. Clara rode with her back straight, pain stitched into every movement. Eli watched her in sidelong glances, how she kept her jaw clenched and eyes forward. Raven Eyes rode ahead, saying little, yet somehow always knowing the safest pass, the cleanest water, where no one would follow. They stopped only when necessary. Each night, the fire was small, the air cold. Eli taught Clara how to sleep with a rifle beside her bedroll. Raven Eyes taught her how to listen to what wasn't being said. Bird calls that stopped too suddenly. A branch breaking beneath the wrong weight. The taste of danger before it arrived. On the 5th night, she sat across from Eli beside the fire. "You think they'll find us?" she asked. "I know they're trying," he said. "If they do, then we make it hurt." She was quiet. Then, "You didn't have to come with me." He didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the fire. "I did." When she finally slept, Raven Eyes spoke. "She's not afraid to die," he said. Eli nodded. "She's afraid to be powerless. She won't be again. They're pursuers." Closed in 2 days later. Too close. The signs were clear ripped foliage, ashes still warm, hoofprints in sets of 4 and 2. No more than a day behind them now. Clara barely reacted. She'd stopped asking questions. She just rode harder. Raven altered their path, leading them into a rocky draw bordered by jagged cliffs, a place where no man could sneak unseen. There, they made a plan. Eli and Raven Eyes would double back through the draw before dawn, set traps and false trails. Clara would stay, rifle across her knees, eyes locked on the horizon. "You sure about this?" Eli asked her. She didn't hesitate. "I've run far enough." The next morning came cold and clear. The wind carried tension like a taut wire. They heard the bandits before they saw them, laughing, careless, loud in their confidence. 3 men entered the draw. Only 2 left it. The last one, bigger, meaner, drunk with rage, made it as far as the ridge before he spotted Clara. She didn't run. She lifted the rifle and fired. Missed. He came fast, screaming. Her second shot hit his thigh. He stumbled. Eli was already behind him by the time he reached her. The knife was quick. The man fell without another word. She didn't speak for a long time after. That night, Eli found her sitting alone, hands clenched, face pale. "I've never killed anyone," she whispered. "You didn't," he said. "I did. I meant to." "Then you're still here. That's all that matters." She looked at him. "You really believe that?" "I have too. Or none of this makes sense." They moved again the next day, leaving the dead behind without burial. There was no time for sentiment. Clara barely looked back. She'd crossed a threshold now. Not innocent, not broken, just tempered. By the 7th day, they reached what was left of the schoolhouse. Burned timbers, shattered desks, ashes still clinging to the foundation stones. Clara dismounted slowly. She walked the length of the ruin without saying a word. She knelt once, picked up a piece of charred chalk, and stared at it as though it still held meaning. "This is what I came for," she said finally. "You still want to build it?" Eli asked. "No," she said. "I want to build something better." Behind them, Raven Eyes watched silently, then turned and walked away. Number goodbyes, no ceremony. His work was done, and that was enough. When Eli and Clara camped that night, they sat closer than before. The air between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was something softer. He offered her the ribbon, faded, still stained from the storm. "You dropped it back in the drawer," he said. She took it, looked at it for a long moment. "Maybe I don't need it anymore," she said. "Maybe," he agreed, "but keep it anyway." The stars burned cold above them, and for the first time in weeks, Clara smiled without pain behind it. Snow arrived earlier than expected. Not the soft flurry kind, but biting wind-driven sheets that erased the trail behind them and warned of a long winter ahead. Eli could smell it on the air, like ash and bone. They'd made it south of the broken schoolhouse ruins, following a narrow river until the forest thickened. It wasn't a place people lived, just passed through. That suited them fine. A small cabin sat tucked into the hillside, abandoned, roof half-caved, but with walls strong enough to hold out the cold. They took shelter without question. Clara fixed the door. Eli repaired the hearth. They spoke less, but understood more. At night, she stared into the fire with that same unwavering focus, as if daring it to falter. She hadn't spoken of the men since the shootout, not of the school, not of the ruins. But something shifted in her presence. It wasn't hope, it was resolve. She'd stopped flinching at every distant crack of twig or sudden gust. Her voice had steadied. Her grip on the pistol had become second nature by the end of the first week in the new cabin. She no longer looked like someone trying to survive. She looked like someone waiting for her turn to strike. He watched her gather firewood with hands blistered and red, and he realized she no longer needed saving, and perhaps never had. That truth humbled him more than war ever had. He tried not to let her see the coughing fits. When the cold set deep in his chest, and he stepped outside to clear the ache, he kept it quiet. Clara noticed anyway. She brought him broth without comment, boiled pine needles to help him breathe, sat beside him and read aloud from a scorched Bible she'd salvaged months ago. Not for faith, just for rhythm. One morning as she poured hot water into a basin, she said, "I had a fiancé." Eli looked up. He was a carpenter, soft-spoken, good with children. He waited for me to come back from the training school in Ohio. But when I returned, he was buried beneath 6 feet of soil. Typhoid. She didn't weep. She didn't soften her voice. She said it plainly, as one names a scar. Eli nodded, then said, "My brother used to say, the land would take everything from a man before it gave him a single damn thing." She considered that. "Then maybe we take it back." They planned without really calling it that. Word spread slowly in those parts. Quiet riders, a broken telegraph, traders carrying talk of a place rebuilding west of the pass, a new settlement. No sheriff, no law, a school promised, but no one to run it. Just an open space, raw and waiting. Clara listened. Eli didn't ask if she wanted to go. She just started packing one evening without a word. The journey was slow. The snow kept pace with them, forcing them to stop often. But they traveled smart, measured, deliberate. They avoided known paths, used high ridges to watch unseen. Clara read the land now, not just followed it. She could spot a falcon's shadow before it touched the grass. She moved like someone who had nothing left to prove. A week out, they saw smoke, wrong kind, thick, black, A ranch burned at the edge of a narrow valley. Eli and Clara approached with caution, rifles drawn. The barn was ash. 2 cattle shot and left. No bodies, just ruin. Footprints again, familiar ones. The same men hadn't all died in the draw. Eli crouched near a broken fence post. He didn't say it out loud. He didn't need to. Later, as they camped in silence, Clara finally asked, "Will it ever end?" Eli stared at the flames. "Not on its own," she nodded. "Then we end it." At dawn, they followed the trail south. It curved toward the base of the bluffs, into low trees. 3 riders. They spotted the firelight first, then the shadows moving. Still careless. Clara didn't hesitate. She loaded her rifle, took position above them near the ridge. Eli moved closer through the trees. He fired first. 1 dropped, the others scattered. Clara's shot tore through the second man's leg, screaming, scrambling. The third ran, but not far. Eli tackled him, rage finally rising. He looked the man in the eyes. "You remember the woman you chased through the storm?" The man spat blood. "She should have died." Eli didn't answer, just stood aside and let Clara come forward. She didn't speak, just raised her pistol and ended it. The silence after was colder than snow, but something lifted in her shoulders, like she'd set down a weight too long carried. She didn't tremble, didn't speak, just stood still for a long time, wind tearing through her hair, before turning and walking back toward the horses. They rode into the settlement at dusk, 3 days later. Modest homes, a church roof, half finished, a gathering hall with boards still unpainted. She didn't wait to be asked. She found the town elder, introduced herself, and said, "I heard you. Need a teacher?" He nodded, tired eyes lighting just a little. "That we do. I don't teach fear," she said. "I don't teach silence. If you want that, pick someone else." He smiled. "We want exactly that." They gave her a 1-room house and a promise. Eli stayed in the hills at first. Old habits. But he came down often, usually bringing something, a tool, smoked meat, a story to make the children laugh. One day, she found the ribbon tucked under a jar on her windowsill, still red, still frayed. She smiled quietly and tied it to the beam above the doorway. Winter softened. Spring cracked open the earth. The schoolhouse stood again, small but proud. Children filled its walls with laughter and questions. One evening, she stepped onto her porch and found Eli waiting. He looked different, still rough, still quiet, but his eyes had stopped looking behind him. "You staying this time?" she asked. "Long as I'm welcome," he said. "You are always welcome." They sat side by side as the sun dipped below the hills, the silence between them now full of meaning. When the wind rose again, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like the past letting go, and when the story of the schoolteacher and the cowboy was told, no one mentioned the bloodshed first. They spoke of how the town stood, how the school never closed, how a man and a woman changed each other without ever trying to. Some said the ribbon above her door was magic. Others said it was a memory. But those who knew, the ones who'd survived loss, storms, and silence, they understood. It was a beginning.